You work hard, pay your bills, and try your best to save a little bit of money at the end of each month, but somehow becoming wealthy and escaping the 9 to 5 still feels elusive and it's just somehow always out of your reach. That's because most people follow a financial strategy that no longer works. I remember talking to a guy who had a great job and was making 6 figures, but every time he got a raise, his expenses went up just as fast. No car, a bigger house, nicer vacations. He thought he was doing everything right, but years later, he was still drowning in debt and was just one paycheck away from financial ruin. So in this video, we're going to talk about the 8 middle-class habits that'll keep you broke forever, unless you do something about it now. These seemingly normal habits might be what you're used to, but they're exactly what's keeping you broke. Starting with the first one, which is measuring your success by your income. A lot of us tend to confuse a high income with wealth, but this is just not the case. Let me explain. Let's say we have a lawyer who's earning $200,000 a year, but who's spending over $195,000 a year on his expensive apartment, flashy car, eating out at fancy restaurants. Assuming this is his only source of income, would you say he's wealthy? Because if he were to stop working and stop earning that $200,000 a year, how is he going to be able to afford his lavish lifestyle? So the real measure of wealth isn't in the form of your income. In fact, it doesn't have anything to do with just money at all either. Real wealth should actually be measured in time, because think about it. If you were to stop working altogether, how long could you possibly survive for? For some people, it's a couple of years or maybe a couple of months. And hopefully this isn't the case for you, but for a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck or are riddled with debt, then there's basically no time at all that they could survive without having an active income. So the goal really is to pay more attention and focus on how you could build your net worth instead of just looking at your income. Because compared to the earlier example of the lawyer who earns $200,000 a year, let's say we have a plumber who earns just $80,000 a year, but is able to invest his money well and let's say has over $500,000 saved and invested. At a rate of 10% a year, he'd be generating $50,000 in passive income each year. And if he were to continue to let it compound, in just another 2 to 3 years, he'll have over $800K in his net worth, which means his investments would generate over $80,000 a year, matching the amount he currently makes at his job as a plumber. Which means the answer to the question of how long he would be able to last without a job would be him being able to continue maintaining his current lifestyle without ever needing to work again. That is wealth, not just a high salary. Social media and the society we live in teaches us to aspire to having all the fancy, flashy things, but it conveniently hides the fact that a lot of people end up struggling financially or get into debt just to afford this lifestyle that they might not even actually want. I was a sucker for this too in the past until I realized how dumb it was. Speaking of being dumb, did I ever mention that I don't actually have a college degree? But that doesn't mean I'm dumb, or at least I like to think. But seriously though, another middle class habit or belief is their overemphasis on formal education and ignoring practical skills. In fact, there seems to be this obsession with degrees, like as if it's the ultimate holy grail in life, where if you get a degree then it automatically guarantees that you're going to be all set for life and you're guaranteed financial success. I'm not saying there's absolutely no value in having a degree at all, but rather it's important to understand that in the society that we live in today, degrees don't always lead to high paying jobs. In fact, a lot of big companies have started ditching the requirement of their applicants to have degrees in their hiring practice. So it really depends ultimately on what it is that you're trying to do. Like, of course, if you're trying to become a brain surgeon, then yeah, maybe get a degree for that. I was talking to this guy recently at the gym who just graduated with a degree, and he was telling me that he's been looking for a job for almost 6 months now and has gotten nothing so far. I feel bad for him, but this illusion that getting a degree would guarantee him a job has completely been shattered. So for the rest of us, focusing on developing a high income skill like sales or coding or digital marketing is so much more practical and is going to have a much better payoff, which could directly lead you to being able to generate more wealth. Plus the fact that you're not going to end up drowning in student loans. Now the next middle class habit that's keeping you broke is buying expensive, affordable things. Okay, what the heck does that even mean? It basically refers to how people buy things they can't afford by buying it on some kind of credit, either using their credit card or one of those buy now, pay later services, or to even take a loan for bigger things like cars. It seems to have become a norm for a lot of people in the middle class to finance everything they can, from cars to furniture and even phones, just because they focus on the monthly payment amounts instead of the actual total cost. It has never made sense to me how some people would consider this to be a perfectly acceptable way to be living living their lives, where they would rather pay for things in installments and have this looming debt instead of just saving the money to be able to buy something outright. And most importantly, accepting it when we're not actually able to afford something. This habit is an almost guaranteed way to never becoming wealthy or financially free, because financing your purchases literally locks you into debt and keeps you trapped in living paycheck to paycheck. Instead, you want to get into the habit of saving up for the things that you want, to be able to buy them outright, and look for ways to buy them cheaper, like buying used whenever possible. Ultimately, you'd want to develop a mindset of frugality and not feel as if you need every new iPhone that comes out. It's really important to live below your means, especially if you want to get out of a financial rut and have more money for investments later on. The underlying reason as to why so many people take on too much debt ties into the next middle class habit, which is chasing instant gratification. We've been conditioned in the society to get whatever we want and to get it fast. Like if you wanted Thai food, you could just DoorDash it and have it delivered to you. And likewise, when you're shopping and you see something that you want, you could just put it on your credit card, even if you don't have the money to pay for it now, or use one of those buy now, pay later apps. Most people fail to think long term and are constantly seeking instant gratification for a quick hit of dopamine. This is what keeps most people trapped in a cycle of having to work at a job they hate to pay for all of these dumb things that oftentimes were bought on impulse. So for me, one easy trick to overcome this is I like to use what they call the 48-hour rule, where if I ever want to buy something, I have to wait at least 2 days to sleep on it and think about it before making the decision to buy it, especially with things that are not absolutely essential. This pause allows you to evaluate whether or not that purchase is really even necessary. Peter Wittmar, who apparently is an Olympic gold medalist, I had no idea, I had to Google it. He has this quote that goes, "Don't sacrifice what you want most for what you want now." And this could apply to every area of our lives, but especially so when it comes to seeking instant gratification and making impulse purchases. So remember, the money you're spending on a new iPhone today could actually be part of the funds that's gonna buy you your financial freedom in the future. I think everybody's been guilty of this at some point. I know I have. It's the temptation to want to spend more when you earn more. Picture this. You might have just gotten a raise or signed a new client, and so now you've got more money, right? Immediately, you're thinking to yourself, it's time to go celebrate and have a nice fancy dinner. And it's also time to get yourself a new phone or a new watch. Or heck, for some people, it doesn't just stop there, but they go on thinking about getting a new car or to move into a bigger, nicer apartment as their incomes grow. People in the middle class often choose to spend more money as their incomes go up. This is referred to as lifestyle inflation. The problem with this is that you end up becoming a slave to your own job and become trapped because you now need the money to pay for all of these new things. This traps people into the cycle of debt and prevents them from ever actually accumulating wealth. Another thing that happens is this phenomenon known as the Diderot effect. This is where when you buy something new, you're gonna feel like you need to buy even more things to match that new thing you just bought. Like for example, if you bought a new outfit, now you might think to yourself, you're gonna need a new watch to match that new outfit, and maybe some new shoes to go with it all. And similarly, if you bought a new couch for your house, then you might just start to think, hey, actually, you're gonna need a new coffee table to go with the couch. And now that you got a new couch and a new coffee table, you're definitely gonna need some nice new coffee mugs to make sure it all fits the aesthetic, right? So that's the Diderot effect. And we have to be mindful about it if you wanna take control of your finances and not end up being trapped in the rat race and becoming sort of a prisoner, shackled to your job. There's always gonna be temptation to spend more when you make more. So it's gonna take a lot of self-discipline to resist the urge, and it'll actually make it so much easier for you to develop the habits that would support your financial goals, like living below your means and focus on growing your net worth. Most people in the middle class tend to avoid risk, so they'd make decisions centered around security, like clinging on to a job they hate just because they feel like it's stable and secure. They would also fear failure and reject any sort of change, which is why most people live the same year over and over again and call that a life. This obsession with prioritizing security is going to hold you back from ever building wealth or achieving any sort of financial freedom. One major difference that I've noticed through my personal interactions is that the rich tend to take calculated risks. They're willing to take risks and are prepared to lose in order to make bigger, long-term gains. Whereas most middle-class people would shudder at the thought of taking any sort of risk. They prefer to stick to what they know and what's comfortable, and not have any sort of growth in their lives. Which is totally fine if you're happy with it, but if you ever have a conversation with literally anyone about their jobs, chances are they won't be too thrilled about it. With this whole quiet quitting trend where people are just doing the very bare minimum at their jobs. And this idea that a job can be safe or stable is completely false. In fact, this recent CNBC BBC article shows that 1 in 3 Americans have layoff anxiety, which means 33% of the population are anxious about job security. I mean, naturally, with the job market being more and more competitive, and then you've got things like AI that's supposedly coming to replace some jobs. So this idea of a safe, stable job isn't even really valid altogether. Maybe it was 20 to 30 years ago, but things are definitely not the same today because job security isn't like what it used to be, and layoffs can happen at any time. Along with that, you've probably heard the advice to work hard so you'll be successful. This is one of the biggest lies the middle class tells their kids. Think about it. The richest people are not the ones doing the hardest work. Construction workers, factory employees, delivery drivers often work way harder than CEOs, but they don't get paid more. The richest people in the world don't just rely on hard work to get rich. Instead, they use leverage, whether it's leveraging on people, hiring teams to do the work for them, or leveraging money, like how investors use their money to make more money through stocks, real estate, or businesses. So if you're looking to get rich, then hard work alone isn't likely going to get you there. You've got to find some way to incorporate leverage into your game plan. It could be leveraging on technology to automate a business that could run without you. I've made a bunch of other videos talking about this, so make sure to go check them out. Anyway, as long as you're putting in physical effort and working hard on something, your income is going to be limited as long as it's tied to your time because you only have 24 hours in a day. And so no matter how hard you hustle, your earning potential is always going to be limited. Now, for many decades, the middle class was taught to trust pensions, social security, and this whole idea of stable jobs for their financial security. But times are different now. Pensions are disappearing, social security is underfunded, and companies will cut you off the moment it benefits them. So this middle class idea that your employer or the government will secure your future is just not applicable in the world we live in today. And here's why. First, companies are realizing that pensions are too expensive for them and isn't cost effective. So they switched to 401ks, shifting the risk to you, the employees. Next, Social Security is running out. See, it was designed when life expectancy was 65 to 70 years, but now people live well into their 80s and even 90s. In fact, by 2035, Social Security might only be able to pay 75% of benefits unless some major reforms were to happen. And finally, companies don't care about your loyalty. In 2023, companies like Google, Amazon, Meta laid off thousands of workers, even those who've been with them for decades. So this all goes to show that you have to take responsibility for your own finances and plan your own retirement. Now that we've talked about all these middle class habits that's keeping you broke, it's time you develop new habits that would support you in becoming financially free. I've made a video talking about the 6 habits that made me 6 figures by the time I was just 24. So make sure to go check it out regardless of whatever age you are. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like below and subscribe if you haven't already. For now, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.